Always wanted to see John Lithgow wearing a puppet hand. Let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of The Role of Jenny Penn, the newest film from director James Ashcroft. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow are now in a suspenseful horror film from the world of Shudder. This, of course, sees Geoffrey Rush playing a judge who, in essence, has a stroke, and he is sent to a retirement home to try and rehabilitate his situation in a lot of respects. There, he meets an individual played by John Lithgow who has a baby doll puppet named Jenny Penn that he wears all the time around this retirement home. Well, in the process, John Lithgow's character is, in essence, terrorizing the retirement home, and nobody seems to want to do anything about it. Now that Geoffrey Rush's character, the judge, is in this retirement home, he's going to do something about it, but he has struggles because he had a stroke. So it becomes a story about how strokes and how people that deal with that have to recover when a force of unnatural ability terrorizes them and what you can do to stop that. Okay, so John Lithgow, Geoffrey Rush, Australian Academy Award winning actor, famous American actor who is going to be Dumbledore here soon, are starring in a movie together on Shudder. I am all about that. I was excited to see this movie when I heard about it. It's a movie that hasn't garnered the greatest of reviews, but has been praised for its acting ability, because, I don't know, Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow are pretty well developed actors. They're pretty awesome as actors. So watching John Lithgow as a bad guy, if you've ever seen Dexter season 4, he's very good at doing that. Geoffrey Rush is just good as an actor, period. So it seems like a win-win. So yeah, sign me up. Thank you to Shudder for sending me a screener for this. And it's a movie that I was looking forward to. Let's just put it that way. And so here it is, my honest review of this movie, and I think the reviews are correct. I think this is a acting powerhouse performance type movie with a middling script. And unfortunately, what I mean by that is I think there are points in this movie that don't make any sense. It does things that are showing the nature of that it shouldn't have been an hour and 40 minutes. It should have been 80 minutes. And I think if it weren't for John Lithgow's villainous performance and Geoffrey Rush's kind of, protagonist performance, having to deal with the stroke situation, I think this would have been a much better, I think this would have been a much worse film, I guess you should say. Not much better, but much worse. And it's based off a short story from Owen Mason. And I think it's an interesting idea. I think the idea of like a guy who's dealing with a situation like a stroke, having to deal with a guy who is basically terrorizing a retirement home is a fascinating thing, because I think the level of acting in this movie shows that you could do a kind of a crazy story and has some really good actors in it. I just think the script and I think the direction, it just falters because it's trying too hard. It's trying to add more stuff than it needs. It's adding in very weird kind of lucid dream type stuff. It's kind of making you wonder what's real and what's not because of the nature of like what happens when you have a stroke and how that messes with your mental state. I think the idea of like, trying to put this in a retirement home and trying to terrorize old folks is interesting, but I think can be a little problematic. And I think this movie does things that just don't make any sense when it comes to the story of who this character John Lithgow is playing, and the kind of the nature of his MacGuffin, which is that doll that he has on his hand. I think there's some points in this movie where it gets too mean-spirited, to be fairly honest, instead of being a really interesting kind of take on what it's like to have a stroke. And I think in the end, I think there are points in this where it tries to be dramatic instead of just being really interesting. And the only one thing I can knock against John Lithgow is his British, maybe he's doing Australian, but I'm assuming he's British. His the way he talks is not very good, so I worry a little bit about how he's going to handle Dumbledore as a British guy. But I think once again, I think the movie has some interesting ideas pointed at it. I think the nature of like is John Lithgow being possessed by this doll? Is he just mentally ill? There are some revelations that I find very interesting about his character. There is a lot to kind of wonder what exactly is the nature of puppet, I guess you could say. And I think that's a pretty interesting idea, to have a puppet be kind of its surrogate to the suspense, horrifying nature of what's going on. And I think there is some arresting, like, visual stuff being put into this movie. Once again, I think the major flaw of this movie is it's just too long, to be fairly honest. I think it could have been an 80-minute movie, excise some, I would say, non-useful material, maybe had like a director's cut on Shudder at some point. It's hard to not want to be interested by this movie just on the nature of the performances alone. Even the actor who's playing kind of the roommate of Geoffrey Rush's character is very, very interesting, but the story just doesn't serve them. It doesn't feel like it has a lot to say. It doesn't feel like it's trying very hard to be truly. It's borderline, and it's kind of struggling to juggle like different genres of filmmaking. And there's one point where, you know, something happens that the John Lithgow's character does, and it's kind of weird and kind of chaotic and goofy, almost like Brazil, like Terry Gilliam style. And then it'll go into this like really dramatic material, and it's just like, your tones are very inconsistent. That's what this movie's major problem is, the tone of the story. So therefore, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but I can recommend it on just the performances alone. I think, you know, this is one of the better performances from John Lithgow, who's given some amazing performances. I think Geoffrey Rush is doing what Geoffrey Rush does. He's very good at dramatic material. He's good at performing the guy as a straight man, and I think he does well here. I think, you know, like with him in the King's Speech, that he's a great actor who does some really interesting things, to be fairly honest. So that's how I feel on the acting performances. But once again, I think, you know, just the story hurts. It hurts the performances in a lot of ways, unfortunately. But once again, to end this review, I think it's a very interesting movie. I think it has a lot of good performances, especially with John Lithgow and Geoffrey Rush, who play great opposites of each other. I just wish the story was better. That's just kind of how it rolls. So it's not a terrible film, but it could be much, much better. That's kind of how I see it. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, that is going to be my take of The Rule of Jenny Penn, which will be on Shudder soon, but it'll be in theaters for a couple weeks, I'm assuming. So definitely check it out if you're interested, especially for the performances. But otherwise, comments below if you've seen this movie. What do you think? What do you think of the performances? Did you like the story? Let me know why. Otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.